back to the Watt Hour, and today we're going to dive into the two worlds of an extraordinary guest, from promoting rock legends like the Beatles and Elton John to championing test fixture innovations at Q1 tests. Tony King's journey is uniquely electrifying. And Tony, it's fantastic to have you here.
Thanks for inviting me on the show. It's a pleasure.
You're welcome. I'm also joined here by Ken Thompson from KTTS. He will be a co-host from time to time. And Ken and Tony have had a great relationship. So, Tony, starting with you, your rock star beginnings. You started at Decca at 16, and then we're promoting US acts in London by 19. Roy Orbison, the Ronettes, and what drew you so strongly to music that early in your life?
Well, I started playing guitar about the age of 8. Quickly became I guess you could say I went through three different phases. I was a big Kiss fan, and then Peter Frampton Comes Alive came out. I fell in love with that. And then in 1978, I heard Eruption, and it completely changed my life. So that pretty much focused me on that genre of music, and started a band. It actually worked out very fortuitous for me because my sister, who is my dad moved back up, was part of a band back in his day in high school, and they were called the Four Casuals. It was a doo-wop band. So my sister has a phenomenal voice, so she quickly became the singer. My brother-in-law, who they've been together now since she was 12 and he was 13, was a piano player, classical piano player, so he was the keyboardist. I jumped back and forth from guitar to bass, depending on what personnel we had, and then we just started doing the local circuits, and I got involved with writing some original music with some local bands that became fairly famous, and that was just the my whole catalyst to it. Has had a wonderful time doing it. We were gigging from the time I was 17 all the way through the time I was 24, playing anywhere from 5 nights a week. My parents were the managers of the band doing top 40 stuff. It was really kind of fun and cool. And, and then I went off and did some hired gun work after our band broke up because some of us wanted to do originals only and some of us wanted to continue doing the same stuff. So anyway, it just kind of went that route, and I ended up sitting on stage with a couple, very well known bands, and just decided, it's time to get serious. And so I talked to my father, and I had a knack for test equipment and jumped into the world of electronic test, and I've been there ever since.
Nice.
So Tony, you work backstage with the Beatles and the Stones. What would you say is your proudest moment of that time of your life?
Wow. No, just watching people, you know, um, walk by you and you're in awe. You're just, you're a very young man. Um, um, Taking pictures with I don't have any pictures of that time really because I was very young. But that was like one of my first exposures, and I just it kind of elevated my interest in the art. And actually, like I said, I've written some pretty cool songs I'm very proud of, and a lot of it has to do with that time and that genre, heavily influenced, I should say. But then again, once I heard Frampton Comes Alive, that kind of started gearing me towards lead guitar and Les Pauls and Stratocasters, and then when I heard Eruption, that just changed everything. So, but yes, I would say honestly, I think one of my most proudest moments was one of the last gigs I did. We were backstage at the Whiskey Go Club in L.A., and back there was Vince Neil, Neil Sean from Journey, Steve Perry was there. All the band members of Poison were there, And we were just taking all kinds of cool pictures. And Neil Sean was like, "Look at my new Harley! Look at it!" And he's showing me some really cool pictures. So that was a lot of fun. But that was also too like the last part where I decided, I'm having a lot of fun right now. I'm not getting any younger. So as a musician, you either live a life of riches or you live a life of poverty. So I chose to start a professional career, and hopefully that answers your question. So I've got plenty of, I mean, God, I've got plenty of stuff that we've done. I think the largest crowd we played in front of was like 7,000 people, and that even looked like a sea of people. And it was super cool. That was a lot of fun. So, but again, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, so like, follow up to that is, can you share one memory that still gives you goosebumps? Maybe introducing Elton John or helping Freddie Mercury shape a track. What comes to mind?
Um, let's see. Well, I was recording down south in LA area, and uh, I was, I was laying down some of some original material. Okay. And in walks Brett Michaels and, with Poison. So they are on the other side of the studio, on the other studio, um, office, if you would. And I got to stick my head in there when they were mixing a song that you guys probably know. And one of the technicians said, "Hey, TK, what do you think of this?" So I'm sitting there and I was like, "Oh yeah, well, I mean, yeah, I would maybe put a little echo on this part of it, and that was about it." And they used some of it, so I would say that was probably it. I mean, I wasn't very starstruck when I was younger because again, I was very young. But as I got on stage, I would say probably my most proudest moment, honestly, was the first time we were playing in front of that crowd in Palma, about 7,000 people, and we did a ballad. We did a Journey ballad, and all the lighters came up, and that was pretty cool. That felt pretty cool. So hopefully, again, that answers your question. I'm very modest when it comes to this. I had a great time, but I mean, we could sit for a 2-hour podcast and I can just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk about that. But
Well,
I understand
maybe
we have things
maybe
to
we'll
cover.
have you back on at another time for that. So obviously, Tony, we're in business relationship together with your current gig, which is Q1 Test, and we've been able to have a lot of success quickly. So I guess the main question is, obviously you're the manager from the everything east of the or west of the Mississippi. I'm sorry, and what was the exact path that got you from the music industry to Q1 Test? I mean, I know you've had some pretty exciting journeys along the way, but you said earlier in the podcast here that you enjoyed electronics, and how did you get into the test fixture area?
Well, when I was again back in the band days, I was the troubleshooter. Something went wrong with the PA. I was one able to go in and figure out what was wrong with the PA. We had plenty of those times. But I always had a knack for tests. My father worked at a company called Fluke, John Fluke Manufacturing, and he was the regional manager for him. And they would come out with a new meter, and he'd say, "Hey, TK," or they called me T-Bone back then, but hey, T-Bone, how do you work this thing? So I would walk them through and show them. So I had a knack for tests. So my first professional job, quote unquote, was working for John Fluke Manufacturers, a Western Regional applications engineer. So I got paid really good money. They gave me a monthly per diem of $1,500, but I got a base pay of like 55,000 back then. So that was really good at that time. But I got to sock all that money away. I drove around a 40-foot Airstream that had $750,000 of test equipment on it. And we would roll up. I'd go with the direct sales guys. We'd roll up to these, companies, you name it. Whether it's PG&E or, I mean, Intel, whoever. And all the engineers would come and line up, come in one side of the van. I had them sign the log and walk them through and show them all the different pieces of test equipment. So I got to do that for a year and a half on the road. And of course, every place I stopped, I found a live band and sat in with them. And that was a lot of fun. Great way to meet girls too, by the way. So I had a lot of fun with that, and did that for about a year and a half. And then uh, um, they offered me a position, but I was moving to Seattle, and I had no interest. I mean, I'm a California boy. I like the sunshine, rain guy. So I joined in with started working for other test equipment firms. And one of my journeys after leaving a long stem with a company called Ward Davis, I found a company called Circuit Check (CCI), and they sold interface solutions, fixtures for ICT, for functional. I picked up on that real quick, but then kind of I kind of got pulled into the integration aspect of testing and really enjoyed that. So ended up selling some really huge systems uh, with by using fixture technology as well as our testing engineering horsepower, and I really enjoyed that. So when COVID hit, I took some time off, spent some time with my kids. I have a boy and a girl, a woman now. She's 24, and my son's 20. By the way, my wife is 6'1". I'm 5'9". Okay, my daughter is 6'1". My son is 6'7". So when you walk into our house, you got this picture of us at Disneyland. I've got my shark jersey on. I'm a big San Jose Shark fan, and I'm literally looking up at them like this. It's hilarious. But anyway, um, I spent some time with them. They were still in school at the time, and built a studio in the house. Taught them to play music, and then got back in, and I landed with Q1 Test, and they're a smaller version of CCI, but just as nimble. Um, Working on our engineering horsepower right now, but we've got the gentleman who owns it, that Jason Riley, is really interested in making the company grow. I'm very interested in making the company grow, and we were fortunate enough to come across Ken and his team, sign them aboard as our rep, and now future's looking great. We've already got a deal under our belts and a couple of others that we're working on.
Excellent. So it's a real shift, from mastering crowds to mastering test equipment. What skills or values from your entertainment career helped you succeed at Q1 Test, going through the history you just shared with us?
Um, Being true to oneself, in other words, what I loved about music is it was playing live, is it's tangible. You're there in front of the customer. The crowd. You're there in front of the people, whether it's at a nightclub or wherever you're at, and you get to shake their hands and stuff like that. And my dad always taught me that, because back then, I'm going to date myself here, but faxing was getting very popular when my father was in I was doing test stuff. And he said, Tony, all these technologies are coming out, but a handshake is always better than talking to somebody on a phone, because it's easier for them to say no to you on a phone than it is looking at them face to face. So the same thing with playing music live, because our motto for our band was live music is best music. Is being able to interface with the fans, like interfacing with my customers, interfacing with Ken, interfacing with his sales team, shaking their hands, looking them in the eye, and having that conversation and developing that relationship. There's a relationship that a musician builds with the people watching the band play. Okay, and you always lock eyes with a couple people, and you start developing a relationship. After the set's done, you go out, extend your hand. How you doing? It's the same sort of thing in my profession right now. I always manage to get to know people online a little bit, but I push really hard for an appointment, because I enjoy shaking their hands and honestly finding out what their challenges are, and addressing those challenges. And that's like reading a crowd. When you're playing you're playing in excess, and they're just kind of, and then you jump into a Van Halen song, and they go, yeah, that's what I'm talking. Okay, I'm reading the crowd now. So same thing applies. I think that's the one thing that I've taken from that extreme to this extreme.
Yeah, I would agree 100% with you there. There's nothing like building those personal relationships. And, Tony recently, he lives up in Northern California. He recently came did a young man move and bonsai down for a meeting with us, and then turned around and bonsai back home. So, he's the kind of guy that's willing to do whatever it takes. And obviously at KTTS, that's our motto. So, Tony, let's unpack Q1 test a little bit, because I'm still in the process of getting my head wrapped around all the capabilities and things like that. Obviously, functional testing, ICT testing. Maybe you could just tell our audience who might not have a good grasp of those things. What's kind of the difference between functional tests and a ICT test, and what type of companies need this type of service?
Well, anybody that's manufacturing a PCB or a printed circuit board um, wants these tests. Generally, after a printed circuit board is manufactured, they will do what they call an ICT, which ICT test, which is in-circuit testing. And what that does, you put it on a tester like a bunch of manufacturers like Keysight, or everybody knows them as HP back in the day. Okay, they have an ICT tester, and there's several other manufacturers. And this looks for shorts and all the buses and everything on the board. It looks for there's a program that's developed around the ICT capabilities, and that is when the board is basically not powered. So you're looking for traces, and if there's a broken trace, or if number 4 is not lining up with number 7, that type. And that's usually that's a pretty standard test with PCB manufacturers, and generally that goes through what they call a CM, or a contract manufacturer. After that comes the fun one, the one that I really enjoy, and that's the functional, or FCT, functional test. And what that is when the board's powered on, you're testing all aspects of the board, whether it's top side, you're probing with like a pen, okay, and it's coming down, it's touching on top of the board, okay, whether it's top side, bottom side, or all 4 sides, because there's connectors and stuff that you can connect into. And what the functional test is looking for is the board performing and spitting out data like it's supposed to. So you're actually reading the IO, which is input output. So once the board's powered on, you're going to input or stimulate the board in a form. There's always an output. Make sure it's outputting what it should do. And that's the part that I really enjoy, because there's a lot more time and effort spent on developing the software for that rack, and stacking the rack that it goes in, interface that's on that particular rack that talks to the fixture. What the fixture is, I call it, or interfacing solution, is where the PCB gets plugged in, top is closed on it, whether that's through a manual process, vacuum process, a little more automated, or a pneumatic process, which is super automated. And that's just kind of pushing a button, and it kind of does it itself. Um, and there's a lot more that gets involved in that, and I really enjoy the functional aspect. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a great place in the world for ICT, but functional, I get a lot of pleasure working with these with functional stuff. For example, William, the first job that Ken brought to our company that we did is a functional job, and it's dealing with a military customer, and it's called what they call a BMS board, which is a battery management system. So this particular PCB is going to manage battery output to the device. I don't think I'm allowed to say what it is, because it's a military application. To the power from the battery, it controls that power and tells that power where to go, when to go, when to do this, when to do that, and that's why they call it a BMS, a battery management system. Tesla uses them. Like I said, they're used in solar applications, space applications, military, obviously, and there's a lot of that to battery management, and like a lot of our our weaponry that we use. And I could probably safely say what happened with our president in Iran probably had some BMS systems on each one of those bad boys that hit. So they're cool application, but I enjoy functional. But hopefully that helps your audience understand there is a little bit of a difference there. But you kind of need one without the other. ICT does have has another way of doing that sort of testing. Okay, and that's called flying probe testing. My company, we support ICT, so We're here to talk about ICT.
So these things are kind of in a robust environment when you're testing them, and you're actually testing them to extremes beyond the test that or beyond the functionality that they're performing, in their daily lives, right? So you're kind of pushing the limits on these things to make sure that there's no failure when these things are active, especially like you're saying, if it's for a warfighter application, or, Williams company, American Lithium Energy is very, very familiar with the BMS, because almost every cell that they make gets incorporated into some sort of a BMS type of application. So that's kind of where we're all tying in together here.
Right.
Obviously, we're the representatives for them, and we have some very, very large volume opportunities coming up that we're going to be utilizing you guys on for some programs. So thank you for that explanation. That was really helpful.
Yeah, no problem. And again, you're absolutely correct, because one of the things that you deal with in regards to functional too, you have to take in consideration is what they call tolerance. So a lot of things are plus or minus 5%, plus or minus 10%, plus or minus, and you must account for those factors. And when you're doing your functional test, develop into the test where you're stressing that part of it. If it says plus or minus 5, we're going to take it to 5. Okay. And see how it performs. So you're absolutely correct. So I'm going to give you one quick story. One of the coolest things I've ever seen in my entire life was something that was done at Circuit Check, my previous life before Q1 testing for COVID. It was a medical application where one of the fixtures that Russ was the engineer that came up with this concept. Anyway, inside of a fixture, they were able to replicate the human body, the sounds, the moisture. It was so cool, this medical application. And what I found out it was for is for a device for a pacemaker and a little small PCB, but it's got to be able to tolerate that environment. And I thought that was one of the coolest things in the world. And I just remember, Ken just reminded me of that. So I thought I would share that with you. But, some of these fixtures, I mean, these are not just clunky boxes. Some of them have some pretty specific, super cool designs that just kind of turns me on every time I get a new application like that. So.
No, I love that. You brought up two things that were important: battery management systems, as Kenneth said, really understanding that state of health. And on one of the podcasts that we had with Marcus Rossi over at Primordius, is he's actually adding AI on top of that battery management system. And on the medical side, we were fortunate to work with a major manufacturer of an implantable device that would detect the K wave in your heart. And by detecting the K wave, I could tell you when, with fairly good accuracy, you were going to have a heart attack. But instead of having a pacemaker that maybe gives you just a moment of shock when it happens, I could tell you hours, days, and maybe weeks ahead. But that was a very interesting project that we were involved in. So listening to you,
Yeah, that was cool.
yeah, thank you for sharing that. Now, you're based in Ontario. The company's based in Ontario. They do Q1 designs, machines, wires, assemblies, full vertical integration. How does that give you an edge? Like, what's your competitive advantage from your perspective?
Well, okay, that's a really nice question. I like that. I would say Q1's advantage is that first off, we have a very good CEO who's willing to put money into the company where it makes sense, and he's putting money into the company where it makes sense. He's hired one of my counterparts from CCI for the East Coast, Gavin Robichaud, and then he hired myself, and he's turned us loose and said, whatever you need, bring those applications, and we will fit it in with the engineering support that we need. What I think where Q1 has an advantage is we're still in that stage right now where we're super nimble. A lot of our competitors are very big, and they're stuck in their ways, and they have a certain way of doing it, where we're a little bit more of that handshake company. Tell us what your application is and work with them on a one-on-one basis, and be able to address them, and make them feel like that they are the priority, because they are the priority. And like for example, my old company, there are 250 employees worldwide, and 120 of them are engineers. So it's a very engineer-driven company, but it was not as personable. One of the project managers may be working on 5 other projects too, And so you get that one call a week and give you your update, but they're not on the phone. Whereas I like to, I know that our inside team and everybody, they're a lot more hands on. It's great to watch our engineers talking to my customers and copying me on the emails back and forth, or inviting me into the meetings, and they're saying, okay, here's our design, this is what we did, we may want to, in our past we've done it this way, would you consider it? So it's very cool, and I like how nimble we are, and also too, we're still that personable company. So that's where I think we have a real advantage.
Yeah, I would definitely concur on that. I think our experience together so far has been, when you're meeting with the engineers, and sometimes these test requirements get passed down from the end customer, who's a prime, to the CM, right? And the CM could adopt it verbatim, word for word, or maybe their requirements don't necessarily need that exact same thing that the OEM required, because of lead times and things like that. They need something a lot quicker. And what my experience has been, your team is amazing at giving the customer solutions that can get the product in their hand really quickly. And the nimbleness, I think that that is absolutely one of your strategic advantages. So when we're looking at the different types of testing, and you mentioned the vacuum pneumatic stuff, you mentioned ICT fixtures, wireless test fixtures, barcoders, programmers, all of these different things. I mean, the nimbleness, but is there one particular product out of all of those that you would say is like, really something that you guys shine at above your competition, or is it all of them?
Well, I think that we make a very competitive product. I mean, we do have a patent on our pneumatic insertion, um, which I could share at another time. It'd take too much time right now. But nothing, that our size and our aggressiveness, and the state of the company is, I think, Ken, where we are at advantage right now, because we are growing, but the market is changing. And as William had mentioned, with AI, especially with AI, especially with the robots, a lot of things are changing. Like I think Ken, I told you about that company I'm working with, Zooks up here. They have the coolest thing in the world. Just real quick, William, if you could. So they have a bidirectional autonomous car, the taxi. So they work right now in let's see, San Francisco, Vegas. They're signing up for Florida. They're working on Chicago. They're working on a bunch of different big cities, but they're growing like gangbusters. But they have a bidirectional car. So the back side of the car looks exactly like the other side of the car. So when it pulls in and parks in a parking place, guess what? That front end now becomes the back end, because it pulls out and goes this way when it goes a whole different, to take a different group. I thought that was the coolest thing. I was like, oh, I mean, thinking outside the box. That's just great stuff. But again, just to address your question again, I think just because of the state of where the United States manufacturing is at in regards to competitive, EV cars, EV planes too. That's already been developed, bikes, and that whole market, and also too with AI and robotics. It's a very exciting time right now to be a young company like our company, and a growing company, because we're going to be able to identify what's the next 10 years, where our competitors have people already there that are used to the older technology. So they got to get up to speed, and it's a
Right.
whole new learning curve for them. So that's why I think it's an exciting time right now to work at Q1 Test.
That's fantastic. As you just said, there's three crossroads happening at one time, which will take us to the next 25 years, and that's AI, green energy, and biotechnology, and infusion of all that. So, as we draw towards the ending of this great interview with you, I want to jump into legacy and life lessons. So, Tony, from the chaos of rock tours to precision of text fixtures, what lessons have stayed with you through both those lives, throughout your life, your career?
I made the best decision of my life when I left music, um, because I didn't like the path that it was going down. Um, and again, my father passed away in 2021. Sorry, I still get anyway. Is just staying true to oneself. Stay true to who you are, what your beliefs are, okay, and what your morals are. And again, just stay true to yourself and your family. And that's my biggest life lesson. I've never strayed from that.
Yeah, I think that that is a key. Especially like you're saying, in your experience, I think we all get put into situations where, you have the opportunity to make the right decision or the wrong decision from an integrity standpoint, and staying true to those core values are important. And that's what I've been trying to do with my company. And there's always challenges, and you have the choice, right? Either take the easy road or take the hard road, and you know, sometimes that easy road looks awful easy, but the result is it's not gonna, it's not, karma's a bitch, right? I mean,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
gotta deal with all the consequences of your actions. One of my mentors, came up with the saying, results often harsh but always true. And that's something I try to follow too. So, well, in wrapping this thing up, I mean, you've been behind a lot of world-changing moments in your music industry, and behind the stage and behind the bench, testing these things out. Is there any particular advice you would give to some future, entertainment and future tech leaders that, other than what we just shared, that you could kind of leave with a nugget of TK or T-Bone advice for us here? And it's funny because my company is KT, which is Ken Thompson, and you're TK. So there we
Yeah, there
go.
you go.
Got a good little
Exactly.
synergy going on here.
Yeah, no, great question. Great question, Ken. Yeah, I would say to anybody that's getting into music or wants to pursue music or is pursuing a professional career is don't take the easy path, okay? Push the boundaries. Push yourself. And another lesson from my father, never be scared to ask the question, just be prepared for the answer. And that's my parting thing is again, push your boundaries and stay true to yourself. But again, don't be scared to ask that question, but just be prepared for the answer.
Excellent. Tony, it's been a rare privilege, and connecting to the rhythm of rock's golden age with today's heartbeat at test engineering at Q1 Test. Thank you for sharing the stories that make history or made history and the inside of fueling tomorrow's innovation. So thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Thanks, guys.
And Ken,
I
as
appreciate it.
always, thank you for setting this up.
Take care, guys.
Yeah.